All right, guys. So Josh Hawley is actually doing something, right? Or at least attempting to do something because he has brought the old Republican Party back to life, or at least a semblance of it, right? The early Teddy Roosevelt Republican Party that I tend to talk to you guys about a lot because honestly, that is the direction that I think this party is ultimately is going to be headed in long term. They're going to have to, okay? And I think Josh Hawley, whom has studied Mr. Roosevelt very much because I read about Josh Hawley in depth and I know who he's trying to emulate. He's trying to emulate Teddy Roosevelt, okay? And for good reason, because he views this day and time with, big tech and these big corporations the same way that Teddy Roosevelt viewed the early 1900s during the quote-unquote progressive era, okay? So Josh Hawley, following in this mode, has introduced an antitrust bill, right? He's trying to make the Republican Party the party of trust busting once again. So he's going to go on Fox News with Tucker Carlson and he's going to talk about this bill. Let's take a listen.
Teddy Roosevelt famously used antitrust law to save capitalism, which was on its way out at the turn of the last century. Roosevelt broke up monopolies because they were abusing consumers and discrediting the entire system. Again, he saved the system by restraining it. There's almost so much abuse people can take before they start looking to other options, all of them bad. Why is socialism so popular now? That's why. Because big monopolies are discrediting market capitalism. Unfortunately, woke corporations seem to have more political power than they've ever had before. No one's doing much about it. One senator, however, is. Josh Hawley from Missouri has just introduced a modern trust-busting agenda. The plan would ban mergers and acquisitions by firms with a market cap over $100 billion. It would also authorize the Federal Trade Commission to regulate dominant digital firms in online markets. Joining us tonight to explain exactly what this would mean and how it might help is Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri. Senator, thanks so much for coming on. What a day you chose to do this. Hours after we learned that the biggest companies in the world are conspiring to change election law. Pretty amazing timing, and it not a moment too soon. Tell us what this would do, your plan.
Well, what it would do, Tucker, is actually put the American people back in control of their democracy and no longer these mega corporations. And we've got to remember what our founders knew, which is that monopolies and liberty are not compatible. No corporation should be so big and so powerful that it can control the political process, that it can override the will of the voters. And that's exactly what today's mega corporations who've gotten big and fat with the help of government, what they're trying to do. So here's what my plan would do. First of all, it would break up the big tech companies. Make them spin off their various parts. For instance, Amazon should not be able to have the dominant e-commerce platform and also control the cloud. It would break up the big corporations. No more mergers and acquisitions by the biggest companies in America. Don't allow the big banks to get any bigger. Tough new penalties for corporations that violate our trust laws, and also a new ability for prosecutors to go after these trusts. And at the end of the day, Tucker, a new focus for antitrust law, which is this. It ought to be about promoting competition. Freedom is protected when there's competition, not when there's monopoly.
So the whole reason we have antitrust law is because when you have monopolies, everything beneath them withers and dies. You don't have a real market when you have monopolies. We're watching that now. Why are you the only person who's noticing this in the Congress?
Well, I think for a long time, conservatives have thought that the market, if left to its own devices, will operate smoothly and will ensure freedom. The problem is that when you get monopoly power like this, it crushes competition, and so the market doesn't really operate. You don't get a truly free market. You get a market dominated by a few powerful entities. And the other thing we're learning is this. When you have mass consolidation of economic power, political power follows. Why is it these corporations are able to blackmail Georgia? Why is it that they're able to threaten these other states? It's because they're so powerful. They've achieved monopoly status. This is another reason we've got to break them up. They're too politically powerful because they're too economically powerful.
So this is why they want you off the stage. I noticed this is why they're calling you an insurrectionist, because you talk like that. Quickly, do you have a hope of getting people on your side? Republicans and, by the way, Democrats. Will anyone join you in this much-needed effort?
I sure hope so. I sure hope so, Tucker. And I think that on the Republican side, you're really seeing eyes opened to the power and danger of these monopolies. I think voters already know it. I mean, they're living it. They're being censored on social media. They're living in fear of if these banks are going to cancel them, if these big corporations are going to cancel them. And I think that elected officials, Republican elected officials, are listening to voters, are opening their eyes, are realizing the dangers, and it's time to do something about it. It's time to protect the people's liberty.
I hope you will come back and give us the names of those senators who stand in your way. I think it's that important. So I hope that you'll promise to do that. Senator Hawley, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys. That's basically Josh Roosevelt, right? That's who it sounds like, okay? So Josh Hawley, right, is introducing this bill. And, guys, you know, Tucker asked a great question, right? Like, does he think that the Republicans are going to get on board with it? They're probably not, okay? But it's funny, you know, how politics goes, because I would hope that some Republicans would at least consider it. But I think what'll be more interesting is how progressives respond to this, because progressives are supposed to be for this stuff too. They're supposed to be for it, right? And the progressives think that Josh Hawley is a fake populist. They think he's a fake populist, okay? And I can tell you right now for a fact, Josh Hawley is not a fake populist, right? He's just somebody whose party doesn't necessarily agree with his views on economics. So he has to toe the line, right? And that's just kind of how it goes. But in this situation, right, you know, what I'm afraid of is that because he's been smeared as an insurrectionist, right? And again, you know, unrightfully so, really, right? If you consider the history of people doing what Josh Hawley did, specifically the Democrats doing the exact same thing. Because of that, I think that Republicans and Democrats who probably would work with him probably just are going to refuse to do so. Okay, they're going to refuse to touch any type of bills that he introduced out of fear of backlash, right? And that is what really worries me about Josh Hawley's future, right? Because he really does have something, and he has ideas that I think the Republican Party can benefit from, okay? And that's why I'm so excited about him. And I just kind of wish that, you know, things didn't go down the way it did, because I think it really hindered his career. But it also propelled his career in a certain aspect as well, because he raised about $3 million in the first quarter of this year, okay? And they basically all came from small dollar donations, right? A lot of his corporate backers in Missouri backed out, but he more than made up for that with taking money from the people, right? And that's kind of the way it should be. So I think that he's going to go in a direction where he's really going to push the Republican Party in a more populist direction. He really is. And he's leading the way on this, because Josh Hawley has worked with Ted Cruz to introduce a Major League Baseball antitrust bill in retaliation for pulling the All-Star game. So let's read about this. A group of Senate Republicans on Tuesday introduced a bill to break up Major League Baseball's monopoly by eliminating their special antitrust exemption, specifically citing MLB's decision to move an All-Star game out of Georgia to protest a GOP election reform bill. Key facts. The idea for the bill, which is introduced by Senator Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, and Mike Lee, was first floated on Twitter in the immediate aftermath of the MLB's decision. It comes as some Republicans are displaying open hostility towards companies they once embraced. The Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell even urged businesses to stay out of politics, though he later backtracked on those comments. Republicans in Georgia have taken similar measures to hit back against companies who protest the new law, with state lawmakers voting to revoke a tax break from Delta and pushing to remove Coca-Cola products from the state house. Despite the culture war angle of the antitrust bill, it could potentially garner Democratic support. Senator Bernie Sanders in 2019 said Congress should reconsider MLB's antitrust exemption over a plan to shut down minor league teams. The antitrust exemption, which dates back to 1922 Supreme Court case and has been upheld in multiple subsequent cases, is the only one of its kind for a sports league. Its elimination would expose MLB to antitrust litigation and weaken the MLB's power to reduce competition. All right, so Bernie is not the only person that supported this. I think Amy Klobuchar and another Democrat has also introduced an antitrust bill this year as well. So again, guys, this is a bipartisan idea, okay? And, it's one of those things where, again, like I said, in politics, where, it seems like there's no such thing as people on both sides of the aisle coming together on ideas they agree with in order to get things done, unless it's to the benefit, right, of these big corporations. But, in a situation like this, which is not in the benefit of big corporations, it would be interesting to see if some of these Democrats got on board with this, right? Because if you have, some people in the Republican Party who have an appetite to do this, like Josh Hawley, and obviously you have the progressive wing on the Democrat Party and some of the establishment Democrats that want to do it, I don't see why it's not something that can get done, okay? Because I think a lot of people do agree that monopolies eliminate competition, right? For example, Amazon has killed small businesses, right? They killed small business in America. Walmart has killed small business in America, okay? Now, don't get me wrong. They've also enabled the growth of other sectors of the economy. And like I said, it's give and take. But at the same time, I think most people can agree that, a free and fair market is not one that's dominated by one company, okay? And then to the point where they get so big where they can just buy out all competition, right, in order to keep their market share. Now, again, this is something that apparently Democrats and Republicans should agree on. Now, to be fair, some small government Republicans and conservatives and libertarians probably see this as, government overreach, right? The government trying to regulate the market, the government trying to get away of capitalism, right? And hey, they're right. That is what this is. But, one thing that we've seen about Trump is that he's made this okay in the Republican Party, okay? To a certain extent, like, for as much as he did govern like Reagan, in my opinion, he also kind of at the same time made it acceptable, particularly during this last year in 2020, for Republicans to be more in favor of these bigger government interventions in regards to the market, right? Specifically to protect conservative values, right? And that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing an evolution where the Republican Party is basically saying, well, these companies have gotten so big where they're basically more powerful than the government, right? To a certain extent when it comes to freedom of speech and things like that. Well, maybe we have to use the government to balance the playing field, right? Maybe we have to use the government to help promote conservative values and to protect conservative values. Also, maybe we need to use the government to protect the free market, right? So, so again, it's an interesting dichotomy between the whole libertarian free market thing where, there should be no intervention, in which, the conservative argument may now be, listen, we like the free market, but, once certain companies get too big in the free market, it's no longer the free market anymore, right? And you start to play a dangerous game of where these companies have taken over the political system and they've taken over culture, they've taken over all aspects of our society, right? And that is no longer capitalism. And I think one of the funniest and most ironic parts about this is, again, Clarence Thomas being the most conservative judge, right, that we probably ever had outside of Scalia, right? I mean, him and Scalia are right there together, okay, in terms of the most conservative judges ever, saying that big tech should be regulated like a public utility. I mean, that's absolutely insane, right? For, a conservative Supreme Court judge to say something like that. Okay, and conservatives cheered it, right? Conservatives are cheering that. They're saying, yeah, we should regulate them like public utilities, right? We're in a insane time period politically, guys. And, political wonks like me, right? I just get excited about this stuff, right? Whether I disagree with it or agree with it, I'm just excited because, I feel like I'm living in history, right? In which we're seeing our politics shift as the world changes. We're seeing these parties adapt. We're seeing people's opinions change. And it's just fascinating to me. It's just fun to think about. It's fun to talk about. And I think that unfortunately, because it's being led by Josh Hawley, some Democrats may stray away from wanting to work with him, even if it accomplishes that agenda, right? I just don't think, we should be in a point in politics where you need a whole party to get on board with something in order for something to get done, right? But regardless of that, when it comes to the MLB thing, I wish they would have framed this better, right? I wish they would frame this as, you know what? we are doing this because we don't think that these companies should be moving money out of these communities over, political differences. Okay. Framing it as, well, we're doing this because they don't like our voting laws. I don't think that's necessarily going to resonate with people. It's going to look like you're doing it out of spite, which they are doing it out of spite. But I think Josh Hawley actually does believe in what he's doing, right? Because I've read in his background. I know that he believes this. But I think the Republicans got to get better at framing, right? They got to get better at, spinning the Democrat narrative on his head, right? If they come out with this bill and say, you know what, we're punishing MLB for taking $100 million out of a predominantly black city, I think that resonates a lot more with people, right? In which you can get more people behind this and you can get more pressure to get something like this going. So, like I said, Josh Hawley seems to be making moves, right? And actually trying to do something here. And we'll see what happens. Like I said, I mean, Tucker, he said, he wants to see who gets behind this and he wants to call out those who don't, right? So we'll see, but let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.